as we start to look at the larger NFL picture and what we learned from the games, I have to say this. How good were Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler together calling that Steelers game against the Giants? They had never called an NFL game together, and they were better than 95% of the groups that call NFL games already. I mean, I just thought they were flat out extraordinary. And I love them in college football. Herbstreit obviously is great on College Game Day. Chris Fowler went straight from calling the U.S. Open, so it's not like these guys have had a ton of practice to get ready for NFL games. And they were so smooth, it was like they didn't even miss a beat. They could have just as easily been calling a college football national title game, a college football playoff game, or a regular season college football game. Instead, they were calling an NFL game, and I watched it, and I thought to myself, man, if you compare, like if you were just being announcer draft, if you compare the new Monday Night Football booth of Louis Riddick, Brian Griese, and Steve Levy, I think, was that the third guy that was in that booth? I think that's who it was, with Herbstreit and Fowler. There was absolutely no comparison. The Monday Night Football booth would be in far better position if they had Herbstreit and they had Fowler calling every Monday Night Football game all year long, because they've had a real difficulty trying to figure out what the booth is going to look like ever since they lost John Gruden. But to me, if you were doing announcing team fantasy drafts, I think Jim Nantz and Tony Romo and Joe Buck and Troy Aikman have to still be your top picks. And I know Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are good as well. Maybe you take all three of those guys out of the equation because they're a lot more established. But I think the next best announced team is probably Herbstreit and Fowler for the NFL, and they've only called one game. You know when someone's really good at something, even if you aren't great at it yourself. You can watch LeBron James play basketball compared to everybody else and be like, okay, this guy's pretty good. You can watch Aaron Rodgers throw the football and Russell Wilson throw the football and be like, hey, those guys can make throws that nobody else can make. Patrick Mahomes maybe as well. There aren't very many guys out there who can call an announced game as well as those guys did. I mean, they were flat out incredible. And again, if you're just starting off your morning with us, NFL, all 32 teams complete. And I thought maybe other than Matt Rule making the decision to hand off to his fullback when he's got Christian McCaffrey in his backfield on fourth down, I thought Vic Fangio's decisions not to use his timeouts were maybe the most inexplicable decision-making out there that we saw in week one from any coach. And tomorrow we'll bring in the crew and we'll all go through and give you our top five, bottom five. It's always a lot of fun, and we enjoy doing it when the NFL weeks are complete. But I thought maybe we could spend a little bit of time here talking about the larger context of what we learned since Thursday. And to me, pretty straightforwardly, the Chiefs should be, I believe, a pretty substantial favorite to repeat in the NFL. I thought if you go all the way back to Thursday, the best team in the NFL is still likely to be the Kansas City Chiefs in my mind. And then as you go through and start to contemplate the other teams that you saw, the Seahawks were pretty fantastic. The Seahawks did not give in any way the Falcons ever a real chance to win. It feels like they're going to be leaning on Russell Wilson in a way that they haven't in the past. And that seems like finally the right decision for Pete Carroll to acknowledge how much talent Russell Wilson has. And instead of trying to lean on his run game and rely on Russell Wilson to bail him out late, that seems like a really good decision. Some teams you're just like, they're still going to be bad. The Jets are bad. I'm not sure about the Bills. We'll see what happens in the AFC East, but the Bills felt like the same kind of team that they already were. The Bears got a win over the Lions, but my God, the Lions and DeAndre Swift choking away that game. I felt like the Lions were going to come out and establish that with Matthew Stafford back, they were a lot better. Instead, the Mitch Trubisky era is ongoing. I'm not sure when it ever ends. Aaron Rodgers, I told you earlier, this now becomes one of the most interesting Week 2 matchups, I think. If you look at the Vikings and what their expectations were coming into the season, I believe I'm correct that the Vikings are now going to have to play against the Colts, and one of those teams is going to be 0-2, and neither one of them is going to be very happy in what is likely to be very competitive divisions. The Viking defense just didn't show up, which is really saying something. You don't ever anticipate them to get run on and dominated like they did, even by Aaron Rodgers. And so the Packers looked like maybe Aaron Rodgers has got a little bit of revenge that he's after. Maybe there's some sort of real mojo that he's trying to establish, that he loves being doubted. Remember, he said he poured himself 4 fingers of tequila. Feels like he had a lot more motivation maybe than in the past to show that he still has a lot left. Cam and the Patriots, just when you want to write off Bill Belichick, what does he do? He finds a way to get the most out of another player in Cam Newton. Now, I'm not sure if Cam can carry the ball 15 times for 75 yards and a couple of touchdowns like he already did, but I do think that's going to be an intriguing story to follow throughout the entirety of this season. I think in the larger universe, the Eagles and the Washington football team are both bad, but the Eagles may not be able to block at all for Carson Wentz. I'm nervous about what the Rams could be able to do to that offensive line based on what we saw the Redskins or the Washington football team. I'm going to call them the Redskins a lot this season. Raiders, Danny G's Raiders found a way to get a win over the Panthers, thanks partly to that decision I was talking about with Matt Rule to run the fullback instead of using Christian McCaffrey on 4th down. I thought the Colts, maybe the most disappointing overall performance of anybody in the NFL in Week 1. They lost as the biggest favorite against the Jags. The Jags we thought were tanking for Trevor Lawrence, but now Minshew Mania continues. We got another part of Minshew Mania rolling in, and they go on the road against the Titans, and whoever wins that game, the Jags or the Titans, is going to be in first place all by themselves in the AFC South because the other 2 teams in the AFC South have lost. So that is now suddenly a big game for both teams. If the Jags could find a way to steal another game in division, they would be 2-0 and they would be in first place, and nobody on the planet would have been anticipating that was going to happen. The Ravens and Lamar Jackson look every bit as good as they did last year. They didn't miss a beat. The Browns, the entire coaching staff gets flipped over, and maybe you have to start to ask the question, are the Browns just fundamentally overrated here? They have a must-win game now coming up on Thursday in just 2 days that I'm actually intrigued to watch and kind of excited to see, because what are we going to get out of Joe Burrow this year, the battle for Ohio? Joe Burrow looked pretty good down the stretch in that final 2 minutes. Is that going to continue? I think that's going to be a storyline worth following, and again, the Browns pretty much have to win that game. The Bucs, when you really look at what we saw from Tampa Bay, I think maybe you and me and all of our expectations were a lot higher than they deserve to be based on the number of reps that Tom Brady has gotten with this team already. But I do think it's intriguing that Bruce Arians has already called out Tom Brady and effectively said the Brady he saw on the field against the Saints was not the Brady he saw in practice, and that he thought Brady made bad decisions on both of his interceptions, and that the pick 6 should have been a throw to another direction. I mean, Brady's 43. He's seen everything before. You usually didn't ever see Bill Belichick come out and criticize him publicly like that. Is that going to provide a lot of impetus for Tom Brady to play a lot better, or is it a brave new world down in Tampa Bay? What exactly is going to come out of there? Drew Brees, after all the tumult in the offseason and all of the reaction to his discussion about kneeling for the national anthem, the Saints came out, looked like a pretty well-oiled machine with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas and everybody else. I have to be and think that it was very impressive the way that they performed. The Cardinals, in what I think is the toughest division in all of football, the Arizona Cardinals go on the road and win against the 49ers coming out of the Super Bowl. The Niners just looked okay. Jimmy Garoppolo continues to look, to me, like an average quarterback in this league, and I'm not sure. I mean, look, I think you could make the argument pretty clearly that Jimmy Garoppolo is the worst quarterback in the NFC West. If you were drafting a quarterback this year, Kyler Murray seems to me like he could be on the upswing in a real hurry. We know already that Russell Wilson's a Super Bowl caliber winning quarterback, that Jared Goff, when you give him time, can be a really, really good quarterback as well, had a chance to win a Super Bowl himself. And Kyler Murray, I think, is going to continue and make a lot of big steps in season 2. And so as you look in that division, I think there's a decent argument that Jimmy Garoppolo is the worst quarterback in that entire division. Then we get into the Cowboys-Rams game. We're just talking about Jared Goff, but what about the Cowboys? They're now 1-7 in their last 8 one-possession games. They didn't find a way to get a win, and you can point to the Jalen Ramsey drawn offensive pass interference call and say it was the wrong one. But ultimately, to me, I didn't feel like it was the ultimate deciding factor that it should have been. The Cowboys didn't make plays throughout that entire game, and so it's hard to feel that bad about them. And then you get into Monday Night Football. And we saw that Ben Roethlisberger, 3 touchdown passes. Again, it seemed to me like he wasn't the same Ben Roethlisberger that we had gotten used to in terms of being able to fully uncork his arm. It felt like he was kind of not throwing the fastball tonight. And maybe that's something where he's going to just have to gradually ease into it as he plays more and more games. But I think with that Steeler defense, you have to be pretty pleased with what you saw from them and their ability to shut down somebody who's as explosive as Saquon Barkley. And then again, the game that ended well after midnight, after 1 a.m. on the East Coast, what in the world was Vic Fangio thinking? He got a gift to even be in that game with the Titans missing 3 field goals and an extra point, and he didn't use his timeouts and give his team an opportunity to come back down the field and win. At mile-high altitude, you know your guy McManus can bomb through a 57 or 60-yard field goal. You went into the locker room after the game with 2 timeouts that you didn't use. This is why I've been arguing for a long time that everybody out there needs a kid who's just skilled at running Madden to be their game manager and advisor, because I was watching this game late at night with my kids. My 12-year-old and my 9-year-old are both sitting there beside me watching this game. We let them stay up. God knows how rough it's going to be for them in school today. But we asked, like, we're sitting there and we're saying, what in the world is actually going on here that they're not taking timeouts? And I said, well, just keep running Derrick Henry. You can take a timeout, run it all the way down. The Titans went and tried to throw to A.J. Brown in the end zone there for a touchdown pass that they thought would avoid them having to kick a field goal. I think maybe the play there was still to run if you were not trying to be super aggressive. It looked like the throw was basically there. But if you get the first down with Derrick Henry, then they have to use all of their time, and you don't even have to worry about kicking off. You can just kick the field goal on the final play of the game or continue to run it and hope that you're going to get a touchdown with Derrick Henry. Either way, it was an aggressive play call by Mike Vrabel, but it's hard to criticize anything Mike Vrabel did if you're looking and comparing him with Vic Fangio down the stretch. It was just inexplicable. I don't understand it at all.